those characters that clearly had some issues both in his childhood and his upbringing. If you want to look at kind of the psychoanalytical approach, or even a lot of theories that we have in modern developmental psychology, we recognize that there is a significant impact from those early experiences on kind of developing the character and the traits that people exhibit later in life that become dominant in their personality. And so you can see very early on he has a very strong desire both to be somebody, but also in some ways there are a lot of people who believe that he also wanted to kind of restore his family's prestige and image in the eyes of both people around him in Corsica, but also more nationally throughout France, as his family had fallen on some rather hard times and been in some ways kind of disgraced. So certainly there was a legacy there that he was relating to. But a lot of it had to do simply with his disposition, with his internal kind of characteristics and those things we talk about in terms of personality.
Part of where Napoleon's character came from had to do with the fact that he wasn't accepted as a noble person. His status wasn't such that he was noble. But from what I've read, he was picked on a lot by people who did consider themselves to be nobility. I guess they use the word nobility to consider themselves. And that does have a tendency for highly intelligent people to motivate them to do things. And whether that is because he was Corsican, or because Corsica had recently been acquired by France, or because he wasn't the eldest son. And a lot of the time, a second son or a third son tries to kind of up their family status.
So psychologically speaking, there's even a complex named after Napoleon, the Napoleon complex, or the small man complex, with the idea being simply that often we will try to compensate for certain deficiencies in our character by over-exaggerating on the ones. And so especially with someone like Napoleon being rather small, being from a rather disgraced family, with his lack of proper grammar, there are a lot of reasons that he would probably be bullied. And so in general, most of us, especially during those formative years, tend to take that very personally, and we tend to have a hard time letting go of that later in life because it was such a significant part of the way that we grew up, and it was so important to us at the time that we were determining the person that we become.
I think most people would consider experiences to be one of the two main things that cause people to behave the way they do. Part of it might be genetic, it might be inborn, it might be the nature side of the nature-nurture kind of argument, but otherwise, a large part of how people decide to act is because of the results of their experiences. They learn to adapt, or they learn to change, or they learn to hide emotions, for example. And I would imagine that was one of the main contributors to Napoleon's attitudes.
During these formative years when we're very, very young, early childhood, toddlerhood, as we're developing our first memories, and then on into adolescence, especially those teenage years, those become the years in our life when we're focusing the most energy on determining kind of our personal identity, but also our social identity, how we're going to be seen to the world. A lot of French didn't really see Corsica really truly as part of true France. It was more of a French territory or possession. And so certainly people from Corsica then would receive the same type of treatment. They would be looked on as maybe not second-class citizens, but probably not quite as true Frenchmen.
Napoleon never really became fluent in French, and yet he conquered France. So it seems like if he really were more French than Corsica, then he would take greater pains to acculturate himself, to adapt to the French language, etc. But the other thing is, when he became a military man and then catapulted into real positions of power through his empire, he radically changed the way laws were done. For example, the Napoleonic Code is actually something that he enforced with the nations that he ruled or that his family ruled on his behalf. So it seems like when he got into a position of power, he changed things. So it doesn't seem like his main objective was to be really necessarily French. The reality is people are willing to follow a strong leader. They're not so interested in following someone who seems weak. Plus, he was intensely intelligent, and his military strategies for their time were brilliant.
No one gets to power without some level of ambition. And certainly the people that kind of stumble into power, you can say, would never declare themselves emperor.
The funny thing about it, and this is a joke that historian friends of mine and I make, we joke that France colonized large parts of the world, but France is the only country that was colonized by one guy and his family. Really. I mean, that's a pretty impressive accomplishment to be recently acquired as a territory and then have a member of that territory rise to the supreme rank that he did within France and then go on to conquer so many nations around France.
And one constant in life is change. And it's generally the people that adapt the poorest or the least that are the least successful usually in life. And Napoleon was a brilliant strategist, not just in terms of military tactics, but in terms of understanding people, understanding social interactions between people, understanding the way that, the government related to the masses. And a lot of this is really what allows him to be so successful and to lead for so long. It's this complex understanding of kind of human nature and the way that what he needed to do in order to be successful.
Napoleon, I know that it may be young in life to decide, but already I sense that you have great potential. What exactly would you like to do with your life?
I think I want to be the general of the military of France.